The Discovery Children's Museum. This is a magical place, full of wonder and laughter. It's here not only for fun and play, it's here to inspire, dream, and learn, where memories are created and magic can be touched. But how did it start? Where did it all begin? As most things, it started with an idea and some motivated people.
My name is Dee Nave, and my first position, I guess you could call me one of the founders. So I am a member of the Junior League of Las Vegas. Back in like 1985, maybe, we took a trip to LA, and we all got on the bus and they arranged for us to see different sites in LA. And so one of those sites was the Barnsdall Children's Center. It was a hands-on arts and science type place where kids went. And we were very impressed, and we thought, well, we should start one in Las Vegas because our kids should have that too.
My name is Mark Tratos, and I got involved with the museum because at the time that the idea was proposed, I was the chair of the board for the Allied Arts Council. And as its chair, I asked the board to come up with some ideas for things that the Arts Council could be doing to have a positive impact in Las Vegas and a positive impact in the community.
My name is Robin Greenspun. I was on the board of the Allied Arts Council. And we were tossing around ideas, thinking about the future of the arts community in Las Vegas and in Southern Nevada. And at that time, there was a new movement called children's museums springing up all over the country. And being a new mother with an infant, I said, why don't we explore the idea of a children's museum for Las Vegas?
And in our research and our work to get all of that done, we learned that the idea of a children's museum had been proposed originally by the Junior League in Las Vegas.
They had already started a feasibility study on doing a children's museum. So we were contacted by them, and that's when I first met and got to know Dee Nave, who was with Junior League at that point.
We approached the Allied Arts Council to say, let's do, rather than to compete, which is ridiculous, let's combine our forces and do a collaborative project.
We then did a number of things to test to see whether it would come to fruition. One of the things we did was essentially built and operated in the Fashion Show Mall a test facility to see exactly what reactions kids would have in doing hands-on kinds of activities.
The larger community really didn't understand what a hands-on museum would be because in everybody's mind, it was kind of a new idea where kids would play with exhibits, to learn.
It's one thing to talk about the concept of a children's museum, which is interactive, but if you're not showing the community what that means, other than with, photos and talking to them about it, it really doesn't work. So we started doing some very simple hands-on exhibits.
The shadow box that became very, very popular, where kids would go into an enclosed space with a photosensitive wallpaper, and then a bright flash would occur and their shadow would linger on the wall. That was the kind of thing that we got to play with. The color effect wheels. The color effect wheels, you take a black and white wheel with a specific pattern, spin it at a high rate of speed, and you will actually produce colors or different kinds of patterns.
The result was phenomenal. Kids didn't want to leave the mall, and it gave us a lot of momentum.
And what we found was their parents were as intrigued as the kids were. And that's really part of the magic of the museum.
In order to introduce that concept to the community, we had sort of a traveling, we had a demonstration project, it was called, and we rotated that exhibit from place to place over 2 years.
So we kept showing people with actual exhibits what we were talking about.
Well, the fascinating thing was that once we started talking about this idea, a number of elements coalesced quickly. Charles Hunsberger was the director of the library district here in Southern Nevada, and he was a huge supporter of the arts. And that was really inspiring because he said, well, I'm interested in doing this.
Also, his philosophy was that libraries were more than just depositories for books. They should be community gathering places and provide other amenities like theaters and things of this nature.
They were about to float a bond issue to build new libraries. All of a sudden, we were in the realm of possibility that if we could help get this bond issue passed, that we might have a building.
With the funding for the library district to get its building built, we had a home. And so we were all anxious and eager to help that process along to get the bond issue passed. We were successful. The library got its funding, and part of that funding supplied cultural resources for galleries, theaters, and the Children's Museum.
Through Mark, we got the gift of a lifetime for this museum. It was the reason that we were able to really get off the ground, and that was through a woman by the name of Christina Hickson. And without Christina's first amazing contribution to this museum, it would have been a beautiful building with nothing in it.
Christina Hickson was the executor of the Lead Foundation. And Christina was at the beginning stages of taking the property and assets that Mr. Lead had left and trying to better the community that he had made his money in. And so she was specifically looking for ways of enhancing the community in ways that were maybe different than other people were considering. So she became an influential aspect to this.
We got the building, the facility, through the library district, and we got the early money that we needed to build the exhibits to fill the building, the facility, and to hire the staff. And those were major steps to get the museum rolling.
Part of Charles Hunsberger's vision for these new libraries was to use world-renowned architects to help in the process to not only put Las Vegas on the map for these innovative libraries, but to also put us on the map architecturally.
Well, I think one of the things that was most fascinating was as we were selecting the architect, and we did an architectural competition, and we had architects from all over the country submitting their materials. The thing that we were looking for is a statement that would not be typical to Las Vegas.
These were amazing architects that were coming in. They were, talented, world-renowned.
Architects throughout America submitted designs, and Antoine Predock was chosen.
I think the Children's Museum and Children's Library, the Predock building, was so unique, so original, that it hadn't any resonance that you could simply say, well, that looks like Las Vegas. That particular facility could be transplanted anywhere in the country and still have visual interest, still have aesthetic appeal and attraction. And I think that was the interesting element. Everything from our conical-shaped party room to the tower, to just the overall lines of the building created substantively such a visual, distinct location that it was itself an attractor that would bring people to it.
It was astonishing when that museum opened. You know, you think of it as a dream come true, but it was shocking. It was like, I know I was standing there thinking, we did it. Look at where we're standing. And it was just absolutely astonishing. But the most astonishing thing was to see not only the kids who were invited for the opening, but the adults, you know, who were in black tie and evening gowns and who were playing with every single exhibition that was in the museum. You know, a very proud moment for all of us who had been involved.
It was, it took a village. It took a team. I mean, and everyone worked so hard, and we were so proud when we opened the doors to the museum.
While we brought in personnel that had run other facilities before, this was the first time this facility was going to be operated and run. And that is always a learning curve, because any time that you open a new facility, there's always bugs. There's always going to be something that's not quite right and that you're going to have to go in and adjust.
It was a very successful opening. Everybody had a wonderful time. People raved about it, but half of our exhibits broke. Talk about a PR nightmare, because people wanted to come back and experience the full thing. So we had to close to get the exhibits fixed. And it took us nearly 3 months to fix the exhibits. So it lost a lot of steam between the opening and we got a lot of bad press because of the exhibits breaking. But the wear and tear in one day for 1 hour at a time for like 6 different shifts, that did it.
I think by the time we celebrated our first anniversary, the reality of the place had really sunk in, and the operation had become smooth enough that we could really enjoy the sound of laughter and the squeals of delight when kids would come through the exhibits and play.
The dream had indeed become a reality. Families flocked to the museum. The Lead Discovery Children's Museum exceeded all expectations. On a daily basis, children played and learned. Buses brought students on field trips. Birthdays and celebrations took place. It was an amazing time. But there was also another reality. It was the reality of keeping the operation running smoothly and financially sound. And this took a lot of work and fundraising. Lots of fundraising.
When I started to step back, an amazing woman by the name of Judy Cebulko stepped forward. And for me, Judy became the next phase of the museum.
My name is Judy Cebulko. I am proud to serve as the chairwoman of the Chairman's Advisory Council for Discovery Children's Museum. When I first joined the board of trustees for Lead Discovery Children's Museum, I was asked to serve as co-chair of these galas. And those were some very big shoes to fill. These galas had a history that preceded me, very high energy, wonderful decor, etc.
It was not a boring gala. They had professional dancers get people up and dance and loud music. And at first, we did fashion shows with Neiman Marcus provided the fashion shows. But it was nothing like you'd ever seen before. I mean, with the loud music and the drums and the professional models, and it was great. And then we had a live auction where people donated very expensive things like cars and airplane trips and European condos. And I mean, it was your fantasy, and people bought it, and it really raised a lot of money.
It was crazy. Nobody had seen anything like it. A local charity hadn't really done anything quite on this scale. And it just took off. It just became one of the events of the year, every year.
Although it was fun, it was quite stressful because the museum relied upon the success of these galas for 70% of their income to keep the building up and operational. Today, that is totally flipped in the opposite direction. We have 70% of our income coming in from earned and only 30% required from contributed. So a lot of stress, as volunteers to assure that not only were the events fun, but they were highly profitable, because those dollars were the lifeline for the museum.
The museum enjoyed success for several years. Families and children continued to experience the museum as they grew up, visiting the exhibits and creating memories. But as time passed, challenges presented themselves to the community and the museum.
In time, we started to see our attendance drop, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why. We had found ourselves in this renowned architectural building on Las Vegas Boulevard, but we were a tenant of a public library.
And so the struggle that we had was we have these dual missions to serve the larger community and specifically the underserved community in particular, and to essentially build an institution that's going to be sustainable and actually functioning. And it's that second element that put the board into a position where it needed to take serious consideration. Is the changes that have occurred something that we can correct, or is it something that we need to think about relocation?
The new board, the new leadership realized that as much as that was an astonishing building, everything that had gone into it was so important, and it still is to the community. It was time to look for a bigger space and to really make an effort to find a new location.
My name's Troy Moser. I'm on the Board of Trustees, and I also serve as the Development Committee Chairman. We started the process of looking elsewhere. We knew we wanted to be central. Well, what's being developed central, and how could we find a part of that? And so we started to look at Henderson and Summerlin, and Town Square was an opportunity at one point in time. But none of those options really ever clicked or felt right.
And we had to roll up our sleeves and figure out how we were going to do this.
The museum was in need of a course correction. The success of its beginning needed to continue. Luckily, the museum had caught the attention of the Donald W. Reynolds Foundation. This would be the beginning of the next step in the museum's growth.
My name is Steve Anderson. I'm a trustee and the president of the Donald W. Reynolds Foundation. We'd looked for a long time as a foundation in a way that we could support youth development. And we couldn't seem to get a handle on that. And this seemed to be the first program that we found that was a good way to accomplish that. And so we looked at this as an educational opportunity for school-age children, actually preschool children as well, but school-age children, to develop programs that would support the arts, would support technology, would support engineering, math, all of those efforts. Back in 2001, the foundation had a large capital grants program. Our chairman happened to take two of his grandchildren, who were elementary age children, to the Children's Discovery Museum here in town.
My recollection of the story was that he came back so excited about having seen this museum and the children playing in it and the families that were with their children, and felt like there might be an opportunity to put a children's museum not only in Symphony Park, but right here on the site with the Smith Center. So, then those conversations got serious, and that's when it got really exciting.
It's really serendipitous that we ended up here on the Smith Center campus, because originally the Smith Center master plan had included a second theater. And the second theater was on the footprint of where the current museum, Discovery Museum, is today. We were well into the planning process and design process of the Smith Center when they decided that the second theater probably was not a viable option. And so that left a gap in the master plan of the block for the Smith Center. And so I can specifically remember going to a meeting to discuss plans for the Smith Center, and they shared that information with our board chairman, Fred Smith, and myself in one of the meetings. On the way back to the office, we got to talking in the car and said, it might be a great opportunity for the Discovery Museum to fill that footprint.
They were certainly willing to consider helping us out, but we needed to jump through about 7 years of hoops, and we applied for and earned one planning grant after another. So suffice it to say, it wasn't easy. We weren't simply invited onto the block. We earned our way. But it came with a challenge. It came with a challenge to raise $7 million on our own, and that was a daunting task at that point in our community. We were in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression.
Judy's our cheerleader. She's the band leader, the drum major, whatever that metaphor you want to use is. She was always banging the drum the loudest and out there in front, encouraging us all to know that we could do this. She was the leader of the fundraising aspect of all this. And to me, that, the hardest part of all this, the fundraising and making sure that the community would get behind the vision that we all had as a board. And she was out there, talking it, walking it every day. There was never a day off for Judy. I hate to compare this place to our own kids, but I would say for Judy, it's like another child.
I put such incredible pressure on myself that I was representing the mission of this museum, the vision of this museum, what it would be when it rebranded itself, how it would feel when you came inside, how people would be communicated with, and how relationships would be cultivated, and how we would collaborate with everyone in town and be that go-to nonprofit. I sold it for 7 years, and I lost sleep over it. And anytime it was on the schedule to meet with the Reynolds Foundation to tell them where we were in our success of this match, couldn't sleep. So it was difficult. It was difficult. It was absolutely well worth it. And anything I might have done to contribute was my absolute pleasure.
The Lead Discovery Children's Museum will soon have a new home and a new
Discovery
name.
Children's Museum is on the move.
The popular Lead Discovery Children's Museum is moving to a new location.
Everyone did get behind the move. The support from the board and the community fell into place. And for as hard as it was to raise the money, with perseverance and dedication, the funds were raised, the goal achieved. Now it was time to recreate the magic and wonder. It was then on to the building, the new home of the museum. The building needed to fit the environment with a cohesive feel to the Smith Center, yet have its own personality. Its design needed to have a playful appeal while being a stunning structure. As the construction moved forward, the vision became a reality. This was going to be a fresh start. The new location would reintroduce the museum to the community. It would start with a slight, yet significant adjustment.
As we looked to the Donald W. Reynolds Foundation for this incredibly generous grant that totaled $43 million, that would provide us a brand new building, state-of-the-art, and all this new exhibitry, we totally understood that the name could not remain Lead Discovery Children's Museum. And yet, we're so sensitive to the fact that if not for the Lead Foundation, if not for Christina Hickson, its trustee, we wouldn't be in this position. We're very sensitive to that, and it was important to a core of us that we meet with her, that we explain to her we were on the move. And with that move, the name Lead would no longer be carried with us. And just as importantly, no other name would replace theirs. It would not become the Reynolds Discovery Children's Museum. It would be the community's museum. And so we would simply become Discovery Children's Museum.
It was then on to the next step, the heart of the Discovery Children's Museum, the interior and the exhibits.
Now you take that box, basically, right? A beautifully designed box, but it's a box this time instead of the playful shapes that our old museum had. And how do you turn it into something fun and playful that'll really get the kids excited.
Craig Galati. I'm a principal with the architecture firm LGA Architecture here in Las Vegas. When we start a project, and this is any project, but particularly a museum, you have to understand who your audience are. Who are the patrons, right? And if, sure, the parents are right in, paying the ticket, right, to come in. But if their kids don't have a great experience, they're not coming back. And so we wanted to create a place that would really cater to the kids' imagination. When we started it, we had this idea that the first floor would be about the earth. And we organized the exhibits to fit with that, kind of the earth. And the second floor would be about flora and fauna. And that was a little older group of kids. But then by the time we got to the third floor, it was about the air and the space. And that was where the older kids would go. And so we wanted to separate the kids a bit from ages. But at the same time, we wanted to make it an exciting and engaging experience for the kids. And then the idea to connect it through the center of the space with the summit was really just a brilliant idea.
My name is Gary Haleamau. I am the Director of Exhibits and Facilities here at the Discovery Children's Museum. When I first stepped into the Lead Discovery Children's Museum, gray was the dominant color. It was a splattered gray and black. Everything was gray. The walls were black. There were really no vibrant colors throughout. They were in different sections, but everything was made out of wood. It was old school design, but it worked. It worked for the time. And the technology was, way behind, of course. Then when we started designing exhibitions for the Discovery Children's Museum, vibrancy was one of the most important things. Our board were like, we need to make it vibrant, exciting. When kids walk in, we want their eyes to light up. We want them to be excited.
We just kept tweaking and pushing, and how can we make it better, and what do we do next to just get a little more square footage out of it, or a little more color, or one more great exhibit. And so we just over and over again kept working on the design.
That board was pretty amazing. They were super engaged in the process. And, a lot of times when we work with, boards or other nonprofit groups, they'll set up a group of 3 or 4 people to kind of work with us, and then we come back and we make presentations. Our presentations to that board were unlike other presentations. They were engaging. They were brainstorming sessions. They were unlike what we were used to with many of our nonprofits. It was. A lot of the good ideas came from them. We facilitated those ideas. We helped put those ideas into a cohesive package. But I would be remiss to say that everything in here we came up with. We didn't. It was a collaborative effort with that board. Specifically with a few individuals on that board. They had a couple of other architects that were serving on the board, and it was fantastic to get their minds in the project as well.
So the buildup for the grand opening of the Children's Museum in March, it was a Friday night. We had put bleachers out in the streets, so the streets were blocked out in front of our front doors. The sun was setting, the neon popped on. It was magical. Not only did we have all of our significant donors who had all scrapped together and helped us achieve the $7 million that was required, we had Christina Hickson in the house from the Lead Foundation. We had Fred Smith and Steve Anderson. We had both of the mayors who loved talking at that podium. And we had the governor of our state, Governor Sandoval. It was a magical night, but I will never forget running around this museum and noting that everything was not pristine and this needed vacuumed and that needed vacuumed. We were still this working board used to handling things on our own, and yet we had a staff now twice the size that we had before. We got those doors open, and I put on those high heels, turquoise if I remember, to go with my purple dress, because, those were the logo colors. And it was akin to giving away a child in a marriage. That's the only thing I can tell you. It was such an emotional experience, and the trustees had so much to be proud of for having pulled off what seemed like an impossible feat.
The doors opened. Children and parents alike made their way throughout the entire museum, their smiles and eyes wide with excitement and curiosity. It truly was a magical night. With the Discovery Children's Museum up and running, the staff and team focused on its mission, the children. As the museum grew into its new home, the staff and team grew too. Wonderful and dedicated people grace the halls and exhibits, teaching, assisting, and developing the core values. And like any organization, people come and go. It's with each departure, the museum's board made sure the organization as a whole took a step forward and built upon the success. One of these roles is the CEO, the leader of the museum.
We found ourselves recruiting for a CEO to oversee this museum who could understand and appreciate all that we committed to be. And we found that in Melissa Kaiser.
Melissa and I made arrangements to have a cup of coffee at a Starbucks downtown, just a few blocks away.
I think we talked for 3 hours sitting in the Starbucks right down the street, and it was like time had stopped. He expressed the history of Discovery. He got emotional about it. We connected as human beings, and I felt an immediate trust and connection. He really gave me my first real look inside of Discovery and the importance and passion that it held in the community.
We clicked. I mean, it was pretty cool. Her heart was in fundraising, and her heart was in art, and she, you know, I could tell she was just a people person, and it didn't take long to see all those qualities in her.
Now, she came from the art world, and she came from Philadelphia, and we weren't necessarily looking for that. We thought we were looking for a CEO who had literally led a children's museum of equal or greater size. But as Troy Moser says so perfectly, you know, sometimes you don't know what you're looking for when you find the right person. And that's what we found in Melissa.
I get to run this amazing museum with the support of the most incredible staff in the world. I was told this is a treasure, but this wasn't a job to take lightly, that taking on this role was going to be taking on a trusted position in upholding this gem for the community and not letting anything happen to it. It's what Troy said. It's what members of the community who had grown up at this museum said. Discovery was hard fought, and there was a lot of community support behind it. And I think it stood as just proof that we could do it, that we could give a future to our children, that there was a community here who really cared. And no one wanted to see any ill come to that this was that precious.
Melissa didn't come to us from a children's museum background, but one of the reasons we were so comfortable with her in the position of CEO is because we knew we had good senior staff in some key positions that did know children's museums, and they're what makes this place live. I mean, you know, all of this isn't worth anything if you don't have a team of presenters and educators and facility managers and painters and the folks that keep it looking fabulous, present the programs, get the kids' attention, and even though they don't know they're going crazy learning, they're learning all kinds of stuff while they're having a blast. It's what they do as presenters and educators that really makes all of the rest of this work.
So the entire museum is structured around inquiry-based learning, where our staff will engage the child and ask questions. So rather than telling the child how something's going to be done or giving them the solution, it's up to the child to find the solution themselves through a series of questioning. So without knowing it, kids are learning deductive reasoning skills, critical thinking, and learning to make their own decisions.
All of these staff, people from different groups or different cultures just different ethnic backgrounds and different levels of education, we can develop such a great place for our people to enjoy.
A lot of times, parents don't know how to play with their kids, or they don't know how to use the exhibit to get the most out of it. And so the staff is here to really, in a friendly way, intervene and ask questions and make it fun and build that bond with the kids that are here. And they're educating. They're educating as they go and empowering kids and making them feel that they've got this and that they can fail forward and they can learn and have fun. And that's really the role. It's a crucial role for the institution.
Museums are a critical part of a community. My name is Jhone Ebert. I am the State Superintendent of Public Instruction in the great state of Nevada. To be able to extend what our educators do in a classroom every day, to extend home, the home environment, right? When families can bring their children to a museum to engage in the activities, to have conversations, to just let them go, be creative, for the children to fail forward, I like to say, the experiment, that it is okay that they work and have hands-on activities that stretch their mind. And so when we talk about museums being an extension of classrooms, being an extension of the home, and I guess I would phrase it not only as an extension, but an integral part, connected. So we see the whole flow, community, home, classroom, learning, exploration. All of those pieces are important to have in any community that exists in our state.
So I think for kids, a lot of times it's hands off. Don't touch. You're in a museum, or, don't go after, things for the shopping cart without my permission. It's hands off, hands off. And here it's really all about the kids, and hands-on is more than just the hands. It's minds-on, it's imagination. So for a kid to play pretend and have a life-size pirate ship that is to scale, that they can put on a costume and act out a part and be prompted to, use their imagination to become a character, or to use their tactile senses for early childhood. That fine motor skill coordination is something they get to develop through all sorts of senses, touch and sound, and putting things together, all the way up through our makerspace, which has 3D printing and laser cutting and ways that you use Tinkercad technology to use your hands and mind to create things. So it's really everywhere in the museum. Art making, learning to use your eyes and notice detail. It's everywhere you turn in the museum. There's a chance to use your hands and your mind.
All of the exhibits that you see here are connected to those standards. They're inclusive of a whole entire community. It's accessible to all of our children, which I think of when I was growing up. I don't think that all of the museums were accessible the way that they are today. And so making sure that they're inclusive, that we have community involvement, that it can expand beyond the classroom, I think those are all important points to think about.
The Museums for All program, which allows access to all families and reduced admission to families on public assistance. And you see, families walking in who thought they'd never be able to bring their kids here, and the delight and the level of the playing field for kids who maybe are struggling outside with poverty or other issues in their life. They get to just really let that all go and explore and laugh and be joyous.
I pulled up, and there was this huge line out the door. I'm going, what in the world? It's almost closing time. What's going on? And so I started to notice that these little kiddos and their moms were all dressed up, and they had the babies in the strollers, and the kids were bouncing up and down like, jumping beans and all excited. And I kind of slipped around the corner and in the front door, and Melissa was standing there. I'm like, what's going on? I didn't even realize what the day was. And she said, well, we're handing out the first round of free family passes. So all these folks had made their way down to the museum to pick up their passes. You know, like I said, they were dressed up for the occasion. They were excited. There was a line over to one side of the check-in desk for all the Spanish-speaking families, so that they could communicate with staff. And I just sort of, just stood there and soaked it in. And it was just, really a sort of a special, sort of cumulative moment. Like, wow, okay, that's why we did all this.
The museum was growing, developing, and making a difference in children's lives and the community. The future continued to shine bright. That was until everything changed. The world had to stop.
So in March of 2020, the governor made the determination that school buildings needed to close. Shortly after that, all venues closed. Never in my lifetime would I have thought that would happen. So we're in this situation, the museum's in this situation. We as an education environment are in this situation going, what do we do now?
We looked at the problem and said, how can we help kids and parents? This is scary. This is going to be frightening. Kids absorb adult fears, and there was a lot of panic. So immediately, we launched at-home discoveries. Our talented staff that's comfortable in front of an audience turned out to be equally comfortable in front of a camera. They came up with ideas and said, here's experiments we can do on camera that parents have, access to supplies. It was oil, water, pepper flakes, things you can easily find around your home. You didn't need special supplies. And we set up these videos and built a web page around that that came out with new editions on a daily basis. And our wonderful marketing team was able to, edit and buffer those videos and then promote them out there. We were able to push them out to our membership. And following the initial success and excitement over this, we started partnering or looking to our other community partners and saying, well, what are you doing? Let us put, resources about your work on our at-home discoveries as well. And from there, it just grew.
This museum took the opportunity to say, how can we shift quickly? Not let's think about it, 2 months from now, but what do we know about the pandemic? How can we keep our patrons safe, the children, the adults that come, how can we keep them safe? So the museum actually spun up a space for children to come and they could do their learning at a distance.
Discovery has classroom space that we often use for birthday parties and other activities that we weren't taking on during the shutdown, that we turned into classrooms for 10 kids each, socially distanced, proper air filtration, and kids brought their own Google Chromebooks, and we set up a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade classroom where principals from the reInvent schools and other schools connected us with kids in the most need.
Chris Popek, principal at Canberra Elementary. I lead the school, lead the kids and staff, and I'm happy to serve the school. When the pandemic hit, we received mass phone calls from parents. What are the options? I'm having trouble with my child learning at home. What can we do? And how it worked for me is we would try to give them the best support we could, even if it was me going into their home or someone else assisting as much as possible, to that answer of, how would you like to go to an amazing learning opportunity at the Discovery Children's Museum every day and receive help from teachers or support staff there? And the parents said, a lot of them said, how quick can I sign up and what do I need to do? So that's how it worked for me. It was an instant solution and an answer to some of those problems that we were having a really tough time solving when the big pandemic hit.
And the museum filled a massive void that was created by the pandemic. It gave families a place to come, feel safe, explore, know that the museum was open, that there were doors. When these doors were open and the doors of the school buildings were closed.
The Discovery Children's Museum did what came natural and faced a challenge for the children and the community. It wasn't an easy time for anyone, and the Discovery Children's Museum was happy to do its part.
For me, museums are a place where we experience our humanity and get in touch with our emotional selves and discover things about ourselves, empathy skills, whether it's an art museum or a history museum or even a children's museum. I think for our community to have a place to go, to reflect, to grow, to discover is vital to the health of any community, and especially ours in Las Vegas.
We have been the recipient of talent from outside. I think now as an institution, this entity, the Children's Museum, can become a seed ground spreading more creative ideas and thoughts, and the elements of creativity that we have here that are unique in Las Vegas, we can share with the rest of the world. And that opportunity excites me.
This is an example of one of the opportunities when you can provide some basic resources. You have a great staff, you have a great program, you have a great board that are able to put all of those pieces together and provide a resource for the community.
I think the leadership and the staff in this museum are clearly focused on the experience that they create for the families and the kids. They're not just focused on getting people in, collecting a ticket, and moving people on. That's not what drives them. What drives them is creating people that will come back, people that got a great experience. The ability to teach kids, that motivates them. And you can see just by the changes that they've made over the years, how it's continued to evolve, and it just keeps getting better and better.
Every experience that I have, just seeing a child smile when he or she plays on any one of our exhibitions is such a joy. It's such a joy for me to see that, and to hear the noise. It's also such a joy.
Because nothing will ever replace the experience of watching a child interact and discover something new for the first time.
I wish more people knew what a difference the museum makes in children's and their families' lives. I don't think a lot of people know about how much there is here to be offered in that regard, how often families come back repeatedly throughout the year, just because of the different activities that their children can enjoy and that they can enjoy. It's not just for the kids, it's for mom and dad too. We just have to keep getting the word out there to everybody that we're here and we're providing a vital service that's necessary, and we have to keep it going.
And what I think is somewhat of a misnomer by some is that somehow we're not a nonprofit. We're just a fun place for kids to come and play. When the truth is we're a playful, colorful place in which kids learn. And all kids learn differently. You know, informal education is critically important. If they can touch something, feel something, and make that connection with what they read in their textbooks, then that's magic. They can come here on the weekend after being here maybe earlier in the week on a field trip, but now they're playing and they're creating something with kids from private schools or home schools or public schools, along with their parents and guardians. That's magic. So if we can inspire a love of learning in our children from a very, very young age, we can change the trajectory and the success of that individual. Are they going to be dependent on this community, are they going to be thriving leaders in this community? And that's the role that we can play.
So if I could whisper in every child's ear as they walk through the door, I'd tell them, this is all about you. This is your day. You get to choose everything that you want to do and use your imagination and have fun.
It's taken a lot of people to get it to this point, and a lot of money, and a lot of dedication, and a lot of creativity. May it continue to keep going. We've got more kids coming.
It will continue on because over the course of 30 years, a group of motivated people made sure the foundation was solid and the mission was true. The Discovery Children's Museum is here to stay.